You ever like to pick a fight with God sometime? Maybe have a beef with him every once in a while? Yeah. Like you've got some disappointments or some unanswered questions or some doubts or some things that if they were answered, if he'd show up and answer them, you'd go ahead and do it. Or you'd say it, or you'd go there, or you'd make it happen, or you'd give it, and you pray, but sometimes it's just crickets. Or is it just me that expresses that? Yeah, you know, I'd like to talk to you about this God a little bit because I've been asking and not hearing. If you're a person who feels like you're just one circumstance away or one disappointment away or one thing of just bailing on this thing because you've tried hard enough, I think you might get something today. I hope I got something for you. Or if you're a person who has been fighting this thing out and you know what, it just doesn't work, but I'm just putting on a smiley face coming to church here and I'm going to see what happens. I think I've got something for you here that'll help you out. And I met somebody like this yesterday. You've been dragged here. You didn't want to come here. You're doing your friend a favor, and you're here right now, and you've already given up, and you've bailed, and you're basically thinking, there's nothing this guy up here is going to tell me that's going to work for me to get back in the game on this thing. I'm out, and I'm just doing my friend a favor. Talked to that person recently. I think I've got something that's going to help here. Or you read this thing and you go, you know, I've been reading this thing for years, and it says what? I'm having a hard time believing some of this stuff. I think I might have something for you. I know I got something for you, actually, that could help you out. Now, I'm not going to tell you that your breakthrough is coming. And I'm not going to tell you that I don't have anything easy for you. I got nothing easy for you today. And I'm not going to tell you that if you get your faith and if you can muster up some faith, your dreams are going to come true. I'm not going to. Matter of fact, I'm going to tell you some things that I think are going to disrupt you and you might disagree with. And you might, some things about God, and you're going to go, no way. And that'll be okay with me, actually. But the idea is I'm going to try and get real with you. We try and get real, and hopefully in that, I get it. I'd like to pick a fight with God on some things, to be honest with you. But here's the challenge I got for you. Here's the challenge. Sometimes God would like to pick a fight with you. And if you could get your head around that, if you could get your heart into that, you might find something authentic in this whole Jesus thing like you've never. Sometimes God would like to pick a fight with you. That's why I got this thing called Wrestling with God here. And so we're obviously going to talk about the most famous or the obvious wrestler in the Bible. You veterans who've been doing this for a long time already knew where I was going. We're going to talk about Jacob and a particular event that happened on the edge of this river in a campsite that is a game changer not only for him, but I think maps all the way forward to where we're at right now for us. But in order to do that, we got to get a little backstory on Jacob. Now, I recognize Troy just got done with this family series and talking about extended family. Jacob, and he mentioned that, Jacob and these people back then. Jacob is a slimy guy. You've got to understand this about him. He is matter of fact, he's a twin, and he's the second one born, and I don't know how this works, but apparently he's even got a hold of his brother who's coming out ahead of him, and mom and dad are trying to figure out what they're going to name this kid, and they name him Jacob, which means, throw it up, heel holder, supplanter, or underminer. Now, I guess what you name the first kid matters, but apparently not the second. They're sitting around going, oh, we'll name the first one Esau. The second one, won't that be cute? He'll be the heel holder, supplanter, underminer, claim jumper, sneaky. Why would you do that? Why would you name your kid that? Now Jacob, with that name, he lived down to that name. He didn't live up to that name. He lived down to it pretty well. And we got this whole history of a kid and a guy who is living out a slimy, manipulative, trying to get what he wants, and learning how to, mom helping him do that, over time. And I got to tell you one thing that I do love about how these Old Testament things happen is they don't whitewash them. You know that? They don't put a spin on it like a Christmas card. You know, when you see the family, and the kids all went to Harvard, and the trip to Hawaii was great, and all that underpinning stuff, you don't see that. Not in the Bible. If you look at it, you get the reality. And Jacob was a slimy guy. Learned how to do his whole life, stealing, manipulating, being smarter. I think he was probably the smartest guy in the room at any given time and knew how to get what he wanted. Later, as they got older, if you were the firstborn, that was a big deal, especially if your dad was Isaac and his dad was Abraham. Because Abraham got a promise, and that promise was going to change everything about the future through this lineage. And so if you were number 3 in line, Isaac, as the firstborn, that was a big deal. Jacob and his mom figured out how to swindle that and steal that birthright away from dad so that Esau, his brother, his older brother, doesn't get it. You want to talk about enmity in the family and a divide between two brothers. Basically, Jacob took everything from his brother, and they split. It was fractured. And that brother Esau, dejected, went off and left everything and moved to another part of the country. And we don't hear about him for decades. Disappointed because Jacob won. And then you get a couple decades worth of Jacob trying to get what he wants and people manipulating him and the art of the deal and all that kind of stuff. You get this whole history of Jacob. He does amass a large family, lots of cattle and resources and assets, and you get this picture of it kind of working for him because he figured it out. But later in life, I'm getting you up to the river here, you got to track with me for a sec. Later in life, he realizes that I've been co-opting, I've been using God for my own purposes. That's the way this whole thing kind of worked. I need to get things right. If you're going to get things right vertically, sometimes you got to get them right horizontally. And so I've got to get right with my brother. And so he packs up all of the entourage, all of his family, all of his wives and his servants. That's how it worked back then. And they move to go to the region where Esau lives, and he's going to make things right with his brother. Now Esau hears that he's coming and gets 400 men, mounts up and rides to go meet this entourage and meet his brother. Now, that intel comes back to Jacob, and Jacob goes, oh no, this may not go well. You know what we're going to do? We're going to split the family in half, and half the family's going to camp over here, and half the family's going to camp over there, because when Esau encounters whichever half, he'll kill them off, and I'll still have a half left. Wow, that's a great plan. And when they get to the river, because over this river, Jabbok it's called, it's about the size of the Yamp, on the other side is where Esau lives, and he starts sending over waves of gifts to try and appease his brother that's on the move to come meet him, because he doesn't know how that's going to go. So sneaky Jacob is now trying to make it right as best he can. That's where I want to pick it up. And that's where we pick up this idea of wrestling. Look at this in 32 here. It says, let me switch over, get a little organized here. I love this. Matter of fact, by the way, this is my favorite message I could possibly give. I asked Troy, would you let me give this one? I know 4.5 years ago, if some of you were here, this is the one I wanted to do to try and get this job. And I did my best because it's not because it's like I do it well, it's because I love the reality and truth that's underneath this. And I'm losing my voice too, third time around. And I love the reality of what we're talking about here. So here we are on the river. The big day is going to be tomorrow. How in the world does the bottles work? Is the question. Sorry. It says, during the night, Jacob got up, I'm trying to get my voice back, and took his 2 wives and his 2 servants' wives, and that's how it worked, I guess, and his 11 sons and crossed the Jabbok River with them over into Esau's territory. And after taking them to the other side, he sent over his possessions, all his possessions. This left Jacob all alone in the camp, and a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. That's all we get. So they're on the edge of the river. It says, guys, we're going to go over, and he takes everything over, and he goes back to his camp. Let's break it down, this little sentence here. He was left alone in the camp. And what do you think he was doing in the camp when he was left alone there? It's pretty obvious, right? He's praying like he's never prayed before. He's probably in prayer posture. He's down there with his hands together. Oh, God, tomorrow I am trying to do the right thing. I'm doing everything I know to do. I'm trying to make amends with my brother who I recognize, God, I confess. I stole it from him. I'm basically a bad guy, but I'm trying to do it right. Help me make it right. And if you would change his heart so that instead of wanting to kill me, he wants to receive me. Do something there. Maybe heal his heart, because I know I've wounded him. I don't know, he's probably legit praying. I need you to show up. I need you to show up, God, like I never needed you before. I believe he was praying as intensely as he knew how. If you would just show up. And it says here, a man came. You see that part? It says, this left Jacob alone in the camp, and a man came. This is an interesting picture to me. Nobody's around. Jacob's praying, and he looks over, and there's a guy standing over there. I don't know. I can picture about, you got to look at it yourself and put your own imagination into it, because just a quick sentence here. Maybe 20 feet, 30 feet over, and he looks and goes, sorry, this is my camp spot. Actually, I'm praying. Leave me alone. I think probably in Jewish days it was more likely to pray. I'm praying. And he should have gone, oh, you're praying. I see that. Go ahead. I'll come back later. And so Jacob goes back to praying. God, please come. And he looks over, and the guy is 10 feet from him now. Dude, I need this space. I'm going to run into my brother tomorrow, and I need this to go right. And would you get out of here? And I think the guy might have even said, no. I don't know. No. Okay. And he goes down and he's praying harder. And next thing he looks and the guy is right there. I think this guy even poked him. Maybe Jacob was down on his knee and pushed him over in the dirt. Well, I don't know how it goes from a guy showed up and now they're wrestling. You figure out how it goes from, I can understand two people in the same spot. This is my spot. This is not your spot. It escalates into violence. I get that. But I don't get how it goes from what this is, where it starts to where it is. And they wrestled together. Wrestling, by the way, this is not the wrestling like you do with your little kids, where you kind of wrestle around and yeah, let them feel kind of tough and then have a big hug. It's not wrestling like you even do with your friends, like 19, 20-somethings, where you're fighting, trying to choke each other out, but then you pat each other on the back and say, that was fun. This is serious, and we know this because Jacob gets hurt. He gets wounded to the degree that he's permanently injured. This wrestling means struggles. These two guys are struggling. And it says even when the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of socket. For the rest of Jacob's life, he's going to walk with a limp. He's never going to be the same. He's not going to be 20 years from now going, oh, back in the day I was praying and I asked God to come and I had this spiritual experience. I'm not sure about it right now, but no, every step he takes will be a reminder that this was real, physical, and it happened. Don't forget that. Something shifts between I want you to go and leave me alone to he won't let go and I won't let go of you. The guy says, let go of me. I gotta go. The daybreak is happening. And Jacob says, I won't let you go. Something happens here where Jacob shifts and realizes that he may be in a different situation. He may be in a fight or a struggle with something bigger than him, something more than him. He realized he's wrestling with something divine. Theologians call this a theophany. I'm not sure that Jacob knew what that was. He just knew, I'm not letting you go till I get something from you, because I need something from you. Picture this. You've got to get your head around this. The God of the universe who spoke it all into existence, and if he didn't want you to be around or he wanted to win a fight, he doesn't even have to touch you. He just talks. He just talks and says, no more, and you'd be gone. He doesn't even do this. Shows up to have a fight and picks a fight. Literally picks a fight. Jacob did not start this thing. This guy started this thing. Or Jacob started it, but he didn't know he started it. Yeah. And God somehow shows up at this level, not this level. I would think if you're going to fight God, he would be like the big guy who puts his head on your forehead and you're swinging and you can never touch him. You can never touch me. I'm too big for you. But apparently, this thing here, this person, allows himself to be put in a hold that he won't let go. That Jacob got a hold of him and won't let go. That tells you something about God. You know, something interesting about God. I like pickleball, and, you know, everybody knows Troy loves pickleball. And you might want to shut the tape off for this part because I don't want him to know that I think he's a pretty good pickleball player. But every once in a while he invites me to play, not too often, but when he does, we'll play. I'm probably a 3-5. He'd probably say, no, Charlie, you're probably a 2-5. And he's probably a 4-5 player. And so I don't know why it's 5 instead of 4-5. I don't know, get the numbers. But when we play, we're playing, and it feels competitive. I get some winners every once in a while. I make some points sometimes, you know. And hardly ever win any games, but sometimes I'll get some points. And it's hard, back and forth, and, you know, but I realize, kind of aware, that at any given time, just the right smack, he'll hit the ball right into my forehead, I'll cry and have to go home. Because he could play like that. He's kind of brought it down so that we can relationally have a good time, even though he's never having to really show off. He's just playing. I kind of feel like God is doing something like that here, because this manifestation of God, this guy who shows up, allows himself to be put in a move and a hold where he can't get away. And apparently it's not just a wink like, let go of me. Apparently it's like real. It's not a game, because that wouldn't be true to this limp that Jacob's going to walk with for the rest of his life. I'm not going to let go of you until you give me something. I need something from you. You ever been in a wrestling match with God? I've never been in a physical wrestling match with God. I don't know how that would go, but I've been in lots of physical, spiritual, and emotional wrestling matches where I don't know for sure, my questions aren't answered. I really need this, but I'm not letting go of you. Ever been in any of that? It's probably an important place. Jacob cries out, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. I'm not letting go until I get something from you. Most of us don't hang on that long. So what does the guy say? This is fascinating. This is so good. So I'm not going to let go of you unless you bless me. And here's what the man says. What is your name? Now, if Jacob wasn't aware that something's going on here bigger than him, he probably would have said, no, I wasn't I'm not, my name's not important here. I need a blessing, because that's not it. The guy says, what is your name? Why is that important? What is your name? And Jacob's like, oh, I hate this question. I know what my name is. You probably know what my name is too. So why are you asking me what my name is? I know it's sneaky, supplanter, underminer, claim jumper, manipulator. I get all that. This guy wants you to name it. God wants you to name it. Okay, my name is Jacob. No, it's not. That's what your mom and dad called you. That's what you've been living down to. I'm going to give you a name that you can live up to. That's what's important here. Why is this important? Because Jacob's real question, the one that's on his heart, the thing that's underneath the thing that he's not even aware of. He thinks the thing is, I need some help because my brother's going to kill me. But the real thing is, he needs to know that he doesn't know, am I legit? Do I have what it takes? Who am I? That's what he really needs to know. Interesting that this wrestler knows what he really needs to know. And so he really says, what is your name? My name is Jacob. Your name is no longer Jacob, it's Israel. Because you have wrestled with God and man and overcome. Your name is Israel. Go back to your dad. And your dad is Isaac, and his dad is Abraham. And Abraham, I gave him the biggest promise of all, that he will be blessed, and all the people through him, and nations will be blessed through him. And you really can't be a part of that promise as Jacob. You got to be a part of that promise as Israel, with a new name. You're praying for this. And to do that, you're going to need to be this. And here's your new name, Israel. Man, that had to speak into his heart. That had to speak something that he needed into his heart, which is more important than what he thought he needed. Isn't that interesting? There's been a shift. It's fascinating. You know, I got into this, about 5 years ago, actually. I started... I've really tried to pay a lot of attention and learn how God is working over time and the redemptive plan and arc of history and how he's working here in this time and how he's working in this time. And so I knew that God's people were called Israel, and I knew that that came from this moment here. Isn't it interesting how Jacob's name turns to Israel, and all God's people now are called Israel. And then if you go later in here, you're going to find out that we were adopted in, and we're God's people, and we can identify with that name, Israel, also. Wow. Do you know what Israel means? It means wrestles with God. Think about the implications of what the name you just got. It means wrestles with God. Okay. That doesn't seem to fit. If you were going to think about the redemptive mission of God, I'd come up with something a little bit more positive, a little bit better marketing plan than wrestles with God. You want to be a part of God's people? Yeah, what are you called? Well, we're called wrestles with God. Huh? I'd come up with like the God Squad or the Shalom Society or the redemptive folks, the forgiveness guys, I don't know, something that was better messaging, so that people would actually want to be a part of us. And but something is different about this. Something is different about this. No, I'm calling you and all the people that are going to follow you and all the people who are going to be sitting, and it maps all the way forward to this room right here. The people of God are going to be people who wrestle with God, because that's what that means. I had no idea that that's what would be called. Did you know that's who you are? Wrestles with God? That's not really how we think it really would work. We really think, if we had a good plan, we built some buildings and they will come, and if you build it, they will come, and you'll have great speakers or great speakers, and people will like that. And that'll be good, and that's how you'll grow your church, and people will want to be a part of that? No. Apparently, the plan is God's people wrestle with God. And that's the plan. I know you came to church, and you're thinking, I was kind of hoping you would tell me some good news. I was kind of hoping you would say, that I'm really loved, and it's going to work out for me, and here's a puppy. I'm actually not saying that. I'm saying that it's real. Real is not that. Real is what keeps you up at night. I don't know what brought you here, but I'm interested in what keeps you up. What's really on your mind. That thing that hasn't been answered. That challenge that's really bothering you. That thing that if you knew it, you'd do it. Whatever that is, that bill you think you can't pay, that thing that you just are heartbroken about, it's that thing. That's the place. Now, Jacob says, I'm not letting go. Israel says, I'm not letting go. Wouldn't that be cool if he turned and said, well, now that I'm Israel, I'm not letting go till you bless me. And it says here, what's your name? Jacob says, please tell me your name. Why do you want to know my name? Haven't you figured this out already? Why do you want to know? He never answered and gave his name, by the way, and then he blessed him right there. That's fascinating. God never tells him his name. You know who it is. You know who it is. And you know what man does, which is good. When something happens cool, Jacob names the place. God doesn't ever name the place. He names the man or the person. But we name the place. That's the way the generations that come along later can walk up. This is the place where Grandpa Israel encountered God and wrestled with God. This is the place. Here's what Israel, Jacob called it. He called it Peniel. Peniel, because I saw the face of God, and yet he spared my life. Fascinating. I was over here. I needed help with my brother. You got to show up for me. You apparently did. And I saw your face. And at the end of the day, after a wrestling match, and I won't let you guys, saw your face, and that was more important than what I was doing over here. There's been a shift. He saw the face of God. And I think that is the real point of this whole thing. You wrestle with God until you see his face, and then whatever you were wrestling about isn't the main thing, because now he is the main thing. That is critical. See the face of God in the middle of the struggle as God's people who struggle with God. Now, if you look at the book and you follow the history, God's people have been pretty bad at this whole wrestling thing. It's more a history of how they haven't wrestled with God than how they did wrestle with God. There's just a few occasions where they actually did wrestle with God. But for the most part, it's a bunch of people who stopped short of wrestling, got all back together by themselves, made some rules, decided who's in and who's out, then kept people out who were supposed to be out, and fell short of seeing the face of God. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not just talking about these guys in the old book, I'm talking about us in the new. Most Christianity doesn't look like people who are really wrestling with God, who basically, I think, kind of miss something. And they should be seeing something that's authentic. People in their real stuff, right? But I'm not sure that's what everybody sees. Matter of fact, I think people out there think that we think we've got the truth and have it all figured out and know what we believe. I think they think, yeah, church is for people who get it or think they have it. Church is for people who have figured it out. That's what I think they think. And then they go, that's okay for them, I just can't do that. That's not where I'm at. Because I don't know if I can think that. But I think wrestling with God is around a circumstance of disappointment or a question. Something real that's kept you up. A challenge or a disappointment. And that disappointment leads to a question that's left, an unmet need, a need that hasn't been met. And that often leads to a doubt or doubting. Nobody out there thinks that we're doubting, they think we're not. But I'm going to tell you that I think doubt is important. This is where you might want to take a note and think about it later, because I'm going to blow you up right now. Why is doubt important? I have asked, I made a little, kind of my own little project over the last 5 or 6 years to ask a lot of people, what is the opposite of doubt? To a T, and the smarter you are, the more likely you are to answer this, faith is the opposite of doubt. I've heard that many times. Well, let's think about that for a second. If doubt is I don't know, then faith must be I do know. not faith. The opposite must be that. I said that wrong. If doubt is I don't know, then the opposite is I do. That's what I meant to say. If doubt means I'm not certain, the opposite of that means I am certain. Right? Certainty is the opposite of doubt. Certainty is when I know, it's check box, done, no question, it's all done for me. I'm going to tell you that I think faith works better in the midst of doubt than it does with certainty. Matter of fact, I'm going to tell you that faith doesn't have a lot to do with certainty. You don't need any faith on the things you're certain about. Because you're certain. It's kind of obvious. Where you really need some faith is the things you're not sure about. The things you don't know. And what's that faith look like? That faith looks like, I don't know, I'm not sure, I doubt whether some of this or maybe all of this is real, but I'm not going anywhere. God, I'm not going anywhere. I'm sticking this out. I got tons of questions. I've been at this Jesus thing for 43 years, and I got more questions now than I did when I got started. I was a lot more certain when I got started, to be honest with you. I got a lot more doubts right now than I did when I got started. And I know you came here going, this is not good. I came here with all kinds of doubts and things that I'm not certain about, and I was sure hoping that the guy who's standing up there really is certain so that I could get some answers to my questions. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not too certain just about a few things. And so I'm telling you, this is going to be a little hard for you. Yep. Sorry about that. So I'm going to tell you, I think doubts are important because actually I think that might be where we encounter God, or at least that's where you exercise your faith. I wouldn't run from Him, I'd run to Him. A while back, I was in Glenwood, and I went into Taco Bell to get some lunch. I get my lunch from the counter, and I turn around and I about bump into this guy I haven't seen in 10 years. And he was a pastor in our area 10 years earlier, and his thriving church, hundreds and hundreds of people, kind of the church to be at. And it was really booming, and then out of nowhere, something happens, and he quits. And here I bumped into him. And I heard the stories, you know, and some of the indiscretion and family issues and stuff like that. And I bump into him, and I haven't seen him, and I've wondered about him for a long time. And I go, whoa, how are you doing? All right. And he asked me the normal pastor question, how's your church? Which means you're supposed to answer with how many people are coming and how much money you have and all that kind of stuff. That's what the pastor question is. And I said, well, because I've been at this a while, well, we're loving God and loving people, and that's what we're about. But I just wanted to turn it, because I wondered what happened. What happened to you, man? And I wasn't asking about the story. I don't want to know about the actual issues. I want to know what happened to you. And he goes, man, I'll tell you, I couldn't believe it anymore. You couldn't believe it anymore? Yeah, I got questions. And I go, I do too. He goes, yeah, I got questions. And I said, I do too. And he goes, well, what did you do? And I didn't answer him. I said, well, what do you do? What did you do with your questions? Well, I wanted to know what his questions were because I thought, you know, I'm pretty good at answering questions and maybe I'd be able to answer some of them. And then he would turn and go, boy, I wish I would have talked to you 10 years ago. This whole thing would have been different. But I really learned when a few of his questions were, those are my same questions and those are hard. What did you do, man? I'll tell you what I did. Here's what I did. I went all around the country and interviewed biblical scholars and philosophers with my questions. And he told me some of them, who they were. And I had read the books of the people that he interviewed. And I asked them my questions, and they gave me their answers. And frankly, they weren't good enough, really. Couldn't buy it. Whoa. And then he said, then I went and I talked to, and he started to list them off, all these national speakers, Christian speakers and pastors of the biggest churches. And I'm thinking, first of all, I'm thinking, whoa, how would you get in to talk to those guys? I could never even get in to have a conversation. And he went in and he asked them the question, or questions. And he said, you know, after they all answered, I just couldn't buy it. I couldn't believe it. He didn't just leave the ministry in his church, he left Jesus. He said, I don't believe it, and I couldn't do it, and I don't think. My answer, he turned and said, well, how did you do it? If you got the same questions, I go, I don't know the answers to those. I thought this was pretty good, but it didn't work. I got those same questions, but Jesus has done a lot in my life, and so I'm going to stick with it. That's what I told him. But I thought a lot about what he did, even how it applies to what we're talking about here. I thought a lot about that process. So what he did is he thought about his questions, deal breaker questions apparently, deal breaker issues apparently. And he found the most prominent people, the smartest people he could find, the most likely people who have thought it through and have the expert witnesses. And he went and he talked to all of them, compiled it all, and then with himself as the judge, judged that it wasn't sufficient, didn't work for him, and therefore he bailed. He had a lot of conversations about God with a lot of people and concluded from those conversations that he couldn't believe. I'm going to tell you that that's what religion is. It's a conversation about God. He had a lot of religious conversations. And from those conversations, couldn't believe, and he bailed. I couldn't figure that, but it makes me think of the first religious conversation that we know of, the very first one that ever happened. Adam and Eve are living in this garden in this relationship with God, and God says, everything's yours. You can have everything you want, except don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because that's not good. You'll die. So they're out in the garden, and they run into a serpent, a snake, that says to them, what did God tell you? Did God tell you that you really can't have this? Why would God do this? I think the first thing that Eve would say is, did you get that, Adam? A talking snake. I guess they talked back then. I don't know, that's weird. And then, but what he said is even more significant. Did God tell you this? Well, did he tell you that what you can't have is bad for you? I'm going to tell you what's good for you, and he doesn't want you to have everything that you think is good, that he thinks is good for you. And she goes, really? I don't know. And what they had was they had a conversation about God as if God wasn't in the room, or if he wasn't near, or if he wasn't a part of this thing. And they had a conversation about him. And they concluded from that conversation, just like my friend did, that might not be true, and I'm going to go a different way. And so their conversation about God separated them from God and prevented a relationship with God. That's what happened on the first religious conversation. And my friend had a conversation about God that separated him from God and broke off his relationship with God. I wouldn't do it that way. I'd coach you to do it a little different than that. I'd coach you to wrestle with God. I think there's an alternate ending. Now, there's not an alternate ending. I'm making this up. I'm speculating, but I thought about this for a while. What would God would have preferred in this event? That first conversation. What would be the way that should have gone? You can speculate on your own. I'd love to hear your story, but here's what I'm thinking happened. What should have happened? All right, Adam and Eve have been told this scenario: don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because you'll surely die. And then they encounter this opposition. Okay, and I think when they hear this, first of all, did you get the talking snake? Yeah. Okay, and then in turn they say, he just said that God is not good and wants to keep things from us. What should Eve have done? We got to go find God. We got to have a talk with him. I got a bone to pick with him. I got a beef with him. And then they go out and they find, is it relationship? No relationship that's any good is 24/7. God set it up that way before there was even a separation. It's a dance, it's a move, it's back and forth, it's real. So they got to go find him because that's how it works. And this is in the alternate ending. And they find him and they say, God, first of all, a snake talked to us. And he goes, yeah, get a load of that snake thing. And then they go, do you know what he said? He said that you were trying to keep something good from us. That you didn't want us to have something that would have been good, but you were keeping it for yourself. So I'm trying to picture out in my alternate ending what God would have said back in light of Genesis 32. What he would have said back. Do you think he would have said, Eve, ooh, my bad. I forgot to tell you there were going to be snakes out there. I forgot to tell you. Oh, I should have told you. That knowledge of the tree, the knowledge of good and evil, that fruit thing. I should have given you more to go on. I'm sorry. You know what? You just trust me, okay? I know more than you, and I know it's bad, and you need to just trust me that you shouldn't do that, and I'm really sorry. No way. God wouldn't have done that. Eve goes, where have you been? Why didn't you tell us the truth? Why we just encountered this? And it's so big a deal. What is your deal, God? I think God would have said, that's interesting. What do you think? What do you think? Well, I don't know what to think now. I thought I knew what to think, but now I don't know what to think. I'm not sure about this, but are you really good? I don't know. Well, what do you know so far? I don't know how it would have gone, but here's what I want you to get. If you got one thing from everything I'm talking about, one thing, game changer, rest of your life will be different if you get this one thing. Everything is relational with God. Everything is relational with God. Everything, this wrestling match, this fight, it's all about relationship. He would have engaged for more relationship, for deeper connection, for reality. That's what would have happened. Well, that's what still happens. That's still what happens. That's what he's trying for. That's what he's looking for is real relationship stuff. I got to tell you, you are closer to God in your doubt, in your disappointment, in your frustration, in your lack, in your heartburn or heartbreak. You are closer to God than if everything was going right. I know that is not good news, but that is real news. See, there's a shift that goes from what you're praying for, God with my brother, to who you're praying to. There's this shift from what I need to who I need. And in that shift, you just might see the face of God. And that face of God will be a game changer. You may walk with a limp. You may never be the same. You may never be as confident. I don't think Jacob Israel could run too well after this. But he said, I'd rather limp and see the face of God, having gone through this all the way to the end, than not know you in this thing. And he goes to him, and this is my perceived need. This is what I need from you. This is what I need this is what I really need, meets the real need, and then actually if you follow the narrative, the perceived need gets met too. And that's the order of how it works. So if I could give you just one thing, everything's relational, and that's what God is trying to do, and the wrestling match is all about that. And you got to have some grit and fight it out. I'll give you two things as your wrestling coach today. Two things that just real quick that I think you need to do. Okay? Set out to do this. One, wrestling metaphor, stay on the mat. Stay on the mat. Keep wrestling. Don't quit. Don't stop short. Most of the time, most of us will stop short, retreat back, and try and consolidate what that is. I'm saying stay there all the way. I just talked to a lady after our last service who said, I wrestled for 30 years why I don't have a husband. But now I see. That's a long time to stick it out. But she would say, I stayed on the mat and I saw God and I see what she did. And this is what God is doing. I don't know how long you have to wrestle, but stay on the mat. Don't stop short. Make it real. You know, when you're praying in this wrestling match, be real. Don't put on that prayer meeting voice. You know that, you've been in a prayer meeting, right, with people, and they start talking like King James? Or they change their tone. I'm like, that is not you. I've never heard you talk like that. I would talk to God like how you feel. I would talk to God about how you feel right now. God, here's how I feel right now. I'm pretty ticked off. I thought the deal was when I got in this whole Jesus thing that my life was supposed to be good and I was supposed to have hope and it was supposed to work out. And frankly, it's not working out that way. If that's how you feel. I don't think God would ever ask you, hey, I'd like you to feel differently like that when you talk to me. Don't talk to me like that. Show up, God. He shows up and picks a fight with you, and he's picking a fight with you right now. And he says, stay on the mat. Stay on the mat. Here's the second thing I'd give you. Pretty simple. Watch for the counter. Watch for the counter move. Watch for the shift. I don't know how it started to get out of here till I'm not going to let you go. But there's some kind of thing that starts as a transaction and ends as a transformation. Did you get that? Pretty good. And so something changes, shifts in you. Watch as you're wrestling to what you're thinking, what's showing up. And I'll bet you'll see a jujitsu move that God is doing on you, flipping it around as he's changing you and reworking you, if you'll stick it out. So I'd stay on the mat and I'd look for the move, because that's a shift. So when I don't believe, I would wrestle. When I'm still in my addiction, I would continue to wrestle. When I got my heart broken because this isn't working out, or I can't meet this need, I would wrestle with God. That's what I would do. I would stay on the mat. Don't leave the mat. I don't have any answers. I don't know what to do. I got nothing, God, but I'm not going anywhere until I get something from you. Don't move. Don't get off the mat, and watch for the shift. Now, you look at this story in Genesis 32, and you think, that's kind of a little flannel graph story that they do in Sunday school. Isn't that cute? I actually think it may be one of the most practical things about how God works. Israel. I think it may be one of the most practical things that you need to know about following God, about following Jesus. Because if you want to know that, this map's straight to loving God and loving people. If you're going to be, well, the idea here is that you will wrestle with God. You will encounter his face. You will receive a blessing. And then you will be a blessing. And that will be how the whole thing changes. That will be how the whole world changes. Because they will see something authentic. Because somebody was vulnerable. And out of that vulnerability, it was a pathway to God. And that brought authenticity. People are looking for something authentic, not something right. And everything will change. This is what Jesus was doing. This is what he was doing. Maybe in fact, Israel is not the most famous wrestler. Jesus, on the night before he was betrayed, is sitting in a garden. I've been to that garden. Been to that tree. Apparently the tree's been there over 2,000 years, so maybe he was right underneath this tree. And what was he doing? He was praying so intensely that he was sweating drops of blood. You want to talk about wrestling over something? And we know what he said. If there's any way this could pass from me, if there's any way, is there some other way? He gets no answer. It doesn't say where he gets any answer. The Father never even turns to him and says, nope, there's no other way, sorry. It's like, what you got to do? He wrestles. And then he gets up and goes and does what he needs to do. And he wrestled in there so that you and I can wrestle and see the face of God. Jesus wrestled for you so that you could wrestle with him and see his face. Completely opposite of Jacob. Jacob wrestled until he got a blessing. Jesus wrestled until he was a blessing. That carries all the way down to right now and right here. I'd tell you, get on the mat. Don't get off the mat. And so the question is, are you ready to rumble? Let's pray. Lord, I know we come in here with all different places and all different things on our mind, but every one of us tends to have something that keeps us up. It's on our mind. I pray that as we step forward, you'd show up, and we invite you to pick the fight with us however you want it, and that we will see your face. That we will be a people here in this church that see your face in an authentic way. And I would not pray that just in general, Lord. I pray that this week, those of us who have really got something to wrestle about and for will wrestle with you and see you and be changed by you. We invite you to do that in Jesus' name. Amen. Wrestle with God.